Thank you all for showing up. And thank you to George Mason University for hosting us and allowing us to use this room, and the panelists for agreeing to participate. Hopefully we'll have a lively discussion about open government and the public's access to it. We're here because it's Sunshine Week. It's a national initiative started in 2002 to open a dialogue about the importance of open government and the freedom of information. The participants of this initiative include the print, broadcast, and online news media, civic groups such as the League, libraries, nonprofits, schools, and others interested in the public's right to know. The effort started by a grant by the Knight Foundation of Miami, Florida. It seeks to enlighten and empower people to play an active role in their government at all levels and to give them access to information that makes their lives better and their communities stronger. Sunshine Week is celebrated each year in mid-March. It coincides with the National Freedom of Information Day and our own James Madison's birthday, which is March 16th. As a civic organization, the League of Women Voters supports open and transparent government, just like Sherry said, and we do so by observing government meetings, doing studies of public policy issues, and informing the public where we can. If you agree with such policies, we invite you to join us, male or female. We are open to all. Our panelists tonight are Mr. Elliot Waxman, an educator from Oakton High School, State Delegate Thomas Rust from the Herndon area, reporter Amy Gardner from the Washington Post, State Senator George Barker from Southern Fairfax County, and George Mason Counsel Tom Moncure. And we're going to have, from this side on, everyone's going to be given, no more than about 5-minute little introduction as to their part in this puzzle, and then we will open it up for questions. There you go, Mr. Paxton. On cue.
First of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this evening. I think what we're doing here is a very important thing, and as a government teacher, an AP government teacher at Oakton High School, this is a topic that we spend some time talking about, not an inordinate amount, but definitely an area that we do focus on. I also want to just say very quickly up front that teaching is a third career for me, and so I've spent time as a political consultant, as a public opinion filter for a long time. I also worked for the federal government when I'm a teacher, and so when I think about this, when Jenny asked me to talk about transparency of government, I've had sort of a series of thoughts about it, and sort of different experiences over the course of my careers. One of the things that I guess I would start with is, and one last thing is that I was asked to talk about my experience with it, particularly in the classroom, in the high school classroom setting, but also just some personal experience.
I need you to speak up a little bit.
Okay.
They're not hearing you.
I apologize. I will.
Okay.
I will.
Maybe if we stand when you're speaking at your introduction.
Okay. Okay.
Might carry a little bit better.
Yes.
So I was asked to sort of both share my own personal experiences to some extent, also how do I teach in the classroom, and what are my high school students doing and thinking about this. So I think I will start by just sort of saying that when you think about transparency in government, it's a multifaceted kind of issue, and throughout time, over let's say the last 25 or 30 years, it changes depending on what we're talking about. Fundamentally, I think, and we're talking about holding government accountable, we're talking about how do we know government is doing what we want it to do. And depending on the time period, depending on the tools that we have at our disposal, it looks different over time. Right now, we are in an information age, and whether it's the internet, whether it's sort of virtual kind of situation, whether it's the ability to transfer information instantaneously, there's an information overload in some respects. And so what we're trying to do, the federal government, the state government, local government, different kind of things, is getting information out, data out to the citizens to let them know how they're doing. Big philosophical questions that we address both in the classroom and then as somebody who works in this, a practitioner in this field, is, how do you measure this kind of stuff? How do we know that we're being successful? I see it in the education world, whether when we're talking about things like, Child Left Behind, or making sure that students are being served the way they want, parents are being served the way they want. Federal government, President Obama is making a big push to make sure that citizens know where the money, the recovery money is being, how it's being spent, to the point where you can ask very specific questions and get the answers that we all, that you individually would like to know. Over the course of a history of this, relatively speaking, this short history of it, we've had experiences where in the older, let's say 15 years ago, the old days, 20 years ago, you would ask, you'd ask a question.
Just yesterday.
No, again, I have personal experience with this as well. You could ask a question, the government may or may not, again, depending on what level of government we're talking about, have data for you, but it was not in a format that you could use. And in the old days, if you looked up, if you wanted to know if a government contract was, if a company was getting a government contract, those kind of things, you had to ask a very specific question, and you'd get a very specific piece of data. Now, again, with the internet and many of the tools that exist, it's exploded. At that level, how do I teach it? What do I think about it? All those kind of things. The fundamental question: how do we know government's working? How we as citizens react? How much information should we know? It's a fairly complex kind of discussion in the classroom, at a fairly high level. I mean, on one level, and I think we all agree, we have a right as citizens to know what our government's doing, and we want to hold our elected officials and our public sector officials accountable. On another level, I think we all agree, and it gets into discussions of things like executive privilege and other kinds of executive kinds of decisions, even in some cases legislative privilege, to not know everything. We don't really want to know everything. So there's an interesting dynamic, and when I talk to kids about it, we have discussions. It's about those kinds of things. We also have, this discussion about, whether it's FOIA, whether it's just the notion of transparency in government. How much information do we really want to know? Not necessarily should we know, but how much do we really want to know? Does it help us if we just do a data dump and get all this information? And so, just recently, as part of a unit that I was teaching on the bureaucracy and the stimulus package that was working its way through Congress, President Obama has got a new website, recovery.gov, where you can track to the dollar, in theory, where the stimulus money is going. And when you raise this issue with the students, is it a good idea, not a good idea? We're going to evaluate this website, this concept. You get sort of mixed responses. Some students think it's great. Here it is. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Other people have, other students have had less than positive responses to it, bordering on it's too much information, or what's the ulterior motive that President Obama, other elected officials really are trying to do. There's something behind the curtain that they're doing it for some other reason than really letting us know what it is.
Thank you.
So there it is.
We're trying to stick to about the 5-minute mark. Delegate Russ?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Can you speak a little bit about, in terms of the state government?
Yeah.
And how this works?
Well, I'm an engineer, and there was a direct question asked to me, so I'm going to try to answer the question. And the question was, does the Virginia House of Delegates follow good rules regarding open and transparent government? And what's the history? The short answer is yes, in my opinion, and there may be debate over that, but the answer is yes. We have done a couple of things this year, and Mr. Moncure is a former member of the House, I believe, and so he can tell you how it used to be. I was going to tell you how it used to be, but we'll let him tell you how it used to be. For the first time, the House has live video streaming, so you can see what we're doing there.
Something we advocate.
Which y'all advocated for.
Yes.
There was some concern about doing it. We do have some people who tend to speak a bit. And we thought for sure that would just lengthen the meetings. As it turned out, the usual characters continued to speak, and the rest of us continued to speak only when we needed to speak. So it really didn't have that much of an impact. Let me walk you through how the House works, and I think that may help you understand my answer when I say yes. First of all, we have rules of the House, and I brought a couple sheets of them. They're 35 pages long. You can go on the internet, you can find them. They tell you how we run the place. So that's very open. Secondly, we work on a committee structure. We're there this year. We were there for 46 days. We acted on 2,576 bills and/or resolutions, which is down about 800 from last year because we limited ourselves to 15 bills. So we have to rely on the committee structure, which will vent these bills, and they either make it out, they come up, they don't come up. So I'm going to talk about the committee structure. The committee, we have 14 committees down there. Each committee has anywhere from 2 to 4 subcommittees. A subcommittee can have a special subcommittee. So when a bill comes in, the speaker will send it to a committee, and then the committee chairman will, about 90% of the time, send it to a subcommittee. Subcommittee must consist of at least 5 people. Majority can act on it. So it means 3 people can pass a bill or recommend it up. Some people don't think that's right because you really can have 3 people in the House that can kill a piece of legislation. If we weren't working on the committee structure, I would proffer to you that not a lot of work would get done if it all had to go before committee. There's a lot of criticism. The Republicans, of which I am one, 5 or 6 years ago actually put into the rules of the House the practice of the House. Contrary to what was told in the press and other places, there had never, let me say again, there had never been a recorded vote in a subcommittee. We've been at this since 1619. There has never been a recorded vote. We said, let's tell everybody what we're doing. We put it in the rules, and the roof fell in on us.
Yeah.
This year, we put in the rules that we would have recorded votes in subcommittees. So they are recorded votes. Bills can still be killed in subcommittees. Just now, you know that Russ voted for them or against them. If they are killed in subcommittee, then they don't come up to the full committee. They can be brought up by the chairman if the chairman so desires, or if a majority of the committee calls for them to be sent up. Now let me talk to you a little bit. When I tell you we've got these 14 committees and then 2 to 4 subcommittees, you think it's just chaos down there. Well, it is. But every committee meeting is advertised. Look in the calendar, you can see where it is. It's on the bulletin board, and if it's not advertised because it's a special committee, it is announced on the floor. So there's no excuse for anybody not knowing where the committees are, where they're at, where they're meeting, and what time they are, and every one of them is open to the public. The committees are run just like a public hearing. The committee sits up here, debates the bill, it hears the pros, it hears the cons, it votes the bill. They're all open. I have never been in a subcommittee that there wasn't open and frank discussion about it. So I think the place is very open. It is a dramatic change from the past, particularly the Appropriations Committee, which is the Money Committee. I mean, there are stories down there that armed guards used to stand at the Appropriations Committee door and prevent people from going in. Committees were announced to meet here, and they met over there. The rules are open today. There is no excuse for anyone not knowing what's going on. Sorry, we're not too long.
That's okay. And
now Amy's going to tell you everything is wrong with this because she doesn't like to be there at 6 a.m.
I think Russ didn't mention, and I think it's something that we need to elaborate on, is the website. All these things are posted on the website, so you don't actually have to physically be in Richmond, for the most part. Amy Gardner,
and thank you also for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I am gonna offer a little bit of counterpoint. A couple of things that Delegate Rust has to say, but first I do want to say that I do think that Virginia's government is open, and I do And I was actually going to make a point that you did about the legislative information system, which is an incredible resource, not just to journalists, but to the public. And I've been using the legislative information system since 1997, and I think it may predate that, but that's when I first started covering state government in Richmond, which is dated me. So before you got there, I mean, it's just a tremendous, tremendous system. You can search by topic, by committee, by member, by bill number. I mean, by calendar, when it's going to be done. I mean, it's awesome, and it's easy to find. It's ledge1.state.va.us. It's a URL that's furnished in your brain.
We have brochures. Everybody take one that has that in it.
The other tremendous resource for the public is a nonprofit organization called the Virginia Public Access Project, which is a compendium of campaign finance data and economic interest disclosure data. In Virginia has some pretty good campaign finance and economic interest disclosure requirements of elected leaders, which these two gentlemen could probably attest to. Every year, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, these folks have to file a statement of economic interest with their chamber. And it basically tells you within certain parameters where their economic interests lie, what above certain dollar thresholds, you can find out which companies Delegate Rust owns, significant amounts of interest, or mutual funds, or real estate, all manner of investments. And Senator Barker, I'm not picking on Tom. And
You know more than I do. I used to, George.
And they're available electronically through VPAP, which is vpap.org, another easy to remember URL. And then furthermore, the site compiles all of these folks' campaign contributions, and also organized tremendously by industry, by election cycle, by size of donation. And all of that information is available to us because Virginia's public records law requires it to be released. And we have the good fortune of having a private citizen who used to be an investigative journalist who made it his life's mission to make that, to use that information and put it out there on BPAP. A gentleman David Gould used to write for the paper in Norfolk. So those are terrific resources that are available to us because of the strength of Virginia's Freedom of Information Act. Other examples, I think, of the strength or the good environment that I have the privilege of working in Virginia are here in Fairfax County, which is where I work. I actually work in Fairfax City, but I cover Northern Virginia politics and government. And I have the good fortune of covering a government, the Fairfax County government, that is an open book. And when I ask for something, I get it. I mean, they put out emails telling me when they're meeting and citing the Freedom of Information Code citation to tell me that they're meeting because they have to tell me that they're meeting. And because the public meetings are open to the public, and that's a strength in the state FOIA law. So I'm very fortunate to work here and to have access to public records and public meetings. One thing about public meetings that I think should be said, just to tweak a little bit of what Delegate Rust had to say, and actually George is the one who pointed out to me, I hope that's okay that I'm blaming you for this, but Tom's right that when the House adopted the rule of not recording votes at the subcommittee level, that was not a new thing. But what was new was that the bills would die if they were not voted up in subcommittee.
Really?
And so before, if 3 of those members voted down a gun control measure, which would be the typical example that this majority didn't want the public to see, it would even if they voted it down, it would still go up to the full committee, and then you'd have a recorded vote. So there was this view that there would be transparency up the chain. And that rule changed the procedure so that those pieces of legislation stopped coming out of subcommittee. And so that was the significance of that rule from our point of view. Another point about subcommittee and committee meetings, they are publicized and a bit open to the public. But the fact that subcommittee meetings happen at 7 o'clock on Monday mornings is not insignificant. And it's not just about reporters who stay up too late the night before drinking wine with their sources. It's actually about members of the public who want to drive into town from Roanoke, Williamsburg, Hampton, and testify. And that's another issue that I think could use some work, which is that you can drive 3 hours to Richmond and be told that they're not accepting testimony. There's no requirement for a committee chairman to let somebody speak to us this week. Is that correct? And that's a problem. And you hear that complaint in special interest groups, advocacy groups. You hear it from local government officials who follow what the General Assembly does very, very closely, because what the General Assembly does affects their lives incredibly closely. There's lots of regulation of how local governments operate and do their business. So you'll have your chance. Sure. Senator Barker.
Yes, thank you all for being here. It's my pleasure to be with you tonight. I don't know why you asked me. It says this law was passed in 1974. I just got elected in 2007. So,
But you're working in the system.
But even if you'd invited Chuck Colgan, who's the president pro tem of the longest serving senator, he didn't get elected until 1975. So even he couldn't tell you what it was completely before 1974. But I agree with what's been said earlier by Amy and Tom, that overall Virginia's government is a relatively open government. In fact, we get awards not infrequently for the amount of information and the rapidity with which we have that information posted on the internet and those types of things. So in a lot of senses, in a lot of ways, our government is a very open government at the state level. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of how things operate in the Senate, and there are some differences between the Senate and the House. And I will say that overall, the Senate is a relatively open place, but not a completely open place. The Senate does have subcommittees of committees, but all bills that go to subcommittees do come to the full committee. So they do get acted on by the full committee. And there are recorded votes at those full committees as long as somebody makes a motion. Now, sometimes if you have a bill and nobody on the committee is particularly interested in having to take a vote on it or is particularly supportive, the bill will just die because nobody made a motion, but at least they heard you. And by not making a motion, they let you know what they really thought of your bill. Have had that happen once or twice along the way. So, but
And you do.
Yes, and I'm sure I'll have it happen more. So I hope a lot more. So speaking out in many years. But I think overall the Senate is a pretty open place, and by and large, what I've seen, at least in the Senate, is that the committee chairs, and particularly the subcommittee chairs, go out of their way to give everybody opportunity to present testimony when they come down. So I think that by and large, people don't walk away feeling that they didn't have an opportunity to present testimony. The only time when it's restricted very much is when there's been an airing of a bill and people have had the opportunity to present testimony to the subcommittee. Then sometimes there's limited amounts of testimony that's accepted at the full committee. But overall, at least either the subcommittee or the committee level, at least one of those two places, pretty much everybody wants to has an opportunity to present things. There are a couple limitations on the openness, and one of them deals a little bit with one of the things Tom was referring to earlier in terms of the Appropriations Committee. Now, we don't have an Appropriations Committee in the Senate, but we do have a Finance Committee that does the functions of both the Appropriations and Finance Committees that operate in the House. They're the committee that handles all the money issues, all the tax issues. Now, every year, they are the ones that get the budget. We all put in our budget amendments, and then on a particular date, and we did break the rule this year on purpose, and do it about a week later because we knew revised estimates were coming out in terms of revenue as well as the stimulus, some of the information from the federal stimulus package. The budget's presented by the Senate Finance Committee. Now, the way they work up that budget is not done in an open process. They have one open meeting at the end where they present, and each subcommittee presents what they came up with, but their little meetings occur up on the 10th floor or wherever else they may be up until that point. I will agree with Amy. I think one of the challenges that there are as it relates to the public is the timing of meetings and particularly the amount of notice that's given on meetings. It just so happened that the last 2 years, I've worked with a group of all the high schools, the government students at Centerville High School, and put in bills the last 2 years relative to issues that were brought forward by those students. Students worked up a great bill this year that I was very proud to introduce. That bill would require passengers riding in the back seats of cars and trucks to wear seatbelts. It'd be a secondary enforcement, so you wouldn't be pulled over just for not doing it, but if you were doing something else wrong, you could be given a ticket for that. And the main advantage of having it there is they publicize that information, and more people wear seatbelts. The majority of adults in the backseat of cars don't wear seatbelts. If you don't wear a seatbelt, you're 60 to 70% more likely as a backseat passenger to be killed. So there's significant reason for doing it. When the bill came before the Senate, it was presented to the Senate Transportation Committee. We knew in advance when it was going to be. It was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The students all came down. They did a much better job of presenting the bill than I ever could. I had 5 different students. They all talked about different aspects of things and what was the rationale for it, and the precedent in other states and how well it worked, etc. And the committee was extraordinarily impressed and voted for the bill. We got the bill through the Senate. Well, we kept trying to find out what was going to happen to the bill in the House, and well, it was held up and they hadn't signed it to committee or subcommittee, and eventually it got assigned sort of at the last minute to a committee, and then we found out, I think it was Thursday morning, that it was going to be heard at 7:30 Friday morning in a subcommittee. Now, heard is sort of a broad use of the term here. The bill was going to be killed at 7:30 in the morning. We knew in advance, given the makeup of that particular committee. I had several bills that I think would have passed if they had a vote on the floor of the House, but they were sent to particular committees or subcommittees. And actually, one time they were sent to a committee. I worked out a compromise with the committee, so they sent it to a different one to kill it. So, there are those types of things that happen. But what happened was we didn't get a notice in time to be able to get the students to come down there. And, they would have to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning to get there by 7:30. So we didn't have the students there. The bill would have died anyway, but I think it would have been good to have the opportunity for the students to be able to, to present things. And so I think there can be more done to give notice, adequate notice, so that the public has an opportunity to make the effort to get down and testify and those types of things.
Thank you, Senator Barker.
Glad to present.
Mr. Moncourt. And I neglected to say that he is a member of the Board of Directors of the Virginia Coalition for Open Government, which sort of takes care of sunshine in Virginia.
An advocacy.
Yes.
As a threshold matter, I was asked to address the extent to which FOIA is taught within the university. And I can immediately punt that first question. I'm on the administrative side of the house, not the academic. I have participated in events with students with regard to FOIA before. I can tell you that the newspaper does in fact know about FOIA, but beyond that, really don't have a clue. Does the university follow FOIA? FOIA in its application basically relates to executive agencies and local government. There's some impact on the other branches of government, but basically in its focus is executive agencies and local government. And George Mason University is an executive agency in the Commonwealth. I answer FOIA questions throughout the university virtually every day. It's always an education process. Third query, limitations that are particular to universities and schools, and this is one, if you're dealing in FOIA, you really need to know about FERPA. We speak in acronyms. FERPA. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is a federal law that basically creates privacy with regard to student records. It's memorialized in the state code, but most of what we deal with in terms of requests that have anything to do related to students automatically devolve to FERPA. Let me close with 2 points, and I want to make you all aware of 2 particular resources. Hopefully I've accomplished nothing else this evening. This is it. The Freedom of Information Council, Advisory Council, is an agency of the General Assembly of Virginia. They have a toll-free number. You pick up the phone, and you get the phone normally answered by 2 staff attorneys from the Division of Legislative Services, Bree Everett, Alvin Gernhardt. This council is empowered to provide written opinions to citizens. Great resource, and they obviously don't make a business of writing opinions, but it's a great resource. Pick up a phone, you can normally get a pretty good answer to virtually any FOIA question you have. Also, I'd like to draw your attention to the Virginia Coalition for Open Government website. which has a resource I use on almost a daily
Their
basis,
newsletter.
but weekly. VCOG has not, the FOIA Council has their opinions listed. VCOG has FOIA Council opinions, Attorney General's opinions, and court decisions all in one place. Very easy to pull up, very well indexed. So if you're ever interested in the law applicable FOIA, I'd commend particularly the VCOG website. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to open to questions from the audience. Anybody have a question?
I want to know more about.
And you need to speak up so everyone can hear
Can
you.
you stand up? Yes. I want to know more about how citizens can or cannot testify before subcommittees and committees. Is there a, I think you mentioned it was not a formal process, it's up to the chair, but when people show up for the subcommittee meeting, are they allowed to speak or are they just going to sit there and be quiet?
I'll try to answer that. There's no formal rule, but you have to remember that the chairman of a committee is a very powerful individual. In my 8 years there, I have never seen someone who wanted to testify in front of either a full committee or a subcommittee not be permitted. Now, I will tell you that time constraints are very, very difficult. I mean, when you're trying to hear the amount of bills that are going through that place in basically half the time of the General Assembly, each body has to act on all their bills by halfway through to send them to the other house. Times are constrained. Now, I'm chair of 2 subcommittees, vice chair of one of the major committees. I will set time constraints. I will say, you got 10 minutes here, folks, and you got 5 minutes pro and 5 con. Now, people don't like that, but it's the only way we can get through the business. But I will tell you, I have never seen a chairman say there will be no public hearing.
Thank you. You had a question?
Does the Senate operate the same way?
Senate operates pretty much the same way. We actually, for the most part, in subcommittees don't set time limits by and large, so it's pretty much free to the amount of time people want to take. Sometimes in committee, particularly if the bill's already been heard in subcommittee, they will set time limits, and usually, as Tom said, what they'll do is they'll give the same amount of time to each side. You know, the patron presents the bill, then the supporters of the bill have 5 or 10 minutes, the opponents then have the same amount of time to present their opposition, and they usually work it out among themselves as to who takes how much time.
That's right.
And if I could just throw an observation into that, I think the point of how much business these bodies have to, wade through every year is a really important point, and it expands the conversation beyond public access and freedom of information. I mean, we have what's called a citizen legislature in Virginia, and there are a lot of really bedrock principles that are behind the reasoning for a citizen legislature. To have these folks, these regular folks earning livings and raising families out in the rest of Virginia, across Virginia, is a value that, it's a fact that has been given value by the state of Virginia, and for some good reasons. And so that means that they're sprinting for 6 or 8 weeks, and government is increasingly complicated, and society and business are increasingly complicated, and so the stuff that they have to regulate and legislate takes time. And so the complaint that I hear most often from advocacy groups and local governments especially, because in Virginia, local governments exist at the mercy of state government, is that they just have all of this regulation and legislation heaped on them, and there's not a dialogue. But their point is good too, which is that we don't have time for a dialogue.
You want to make a point?
Yes. I want to make a plea. I would like the League of Women Voters to advocate we have no more 46-day sessions. 60 days is very difficult.
That proposed legislation was killed this year.
46 days, we simply can't do justice to the bills that we're having. And particularly the bills that start on the other side. I had 2 committees that met one time to do every single bill that came over from the House with no subcommittees having met, because of the amount of time that we had to be able to handle things. And we simply did not have the time to do justice to the legislation.
2 minutes. The Senate ought to limit the number of bills. Like we did. Number two.
We put in fewer total bills than you did, even without a limit.
Number two,
This is transparent government.
I want to reinforce what George had said about the time. I had a bill that was heard on the last day that you could hear bills. There were 40 bills, and this is in front of Courts of Justice, which is a very tough committee. It's a very legalistic committee. I'm not a lawyer. But it had 40 bills that it tried to hear in 3 hours. When I walked in there, the chairman said, these 10 bills are being assigned to a special subcommittee. Been there long enough to know that that's, in the vernacular of the street, that ain't good. So I had some of my Senate friends appeal to him, and we then got those 10 bills heard after the session about 4 o'clock on the last day. And I don't have to tell you what happened to all 10 bills. But having said that, time is a huge issue down there. To give you the contrasting view, I sent a letter to the speaker asking him to could limit this session to 30 days, because all we were going to talk about was the budget. So why not be there just 30 days? I'm still waiting for the answer.
Yes.
Talking about committees, who assigns the bill to this committee or that committee? Because frequently I hear this bill went to a very unloving committee and doesn't have a chance. Are there alternatives?
There are unloving committees, and particularly some unloving subcommittees in the House, I can assure you. But in the Senate, the way it operates is that the clerk of the Senate assigns the bill to committees, and it's done based upon what code section. So it's very prescriptive as to where the bills go. Now, that being said, there are some bills each year that go to one particular committee, because that's the code section applies to that. That committee handles things that deal with that code section. But it's more logical to be somewhere else, and those bills sometimes then get re-referred to another committee.
The Speaker of the House has, for all intents and purposes, total authority to assign the bills where he wants. I will tell you that then when the bill gets to a committee, the chairman of that committee, if they send an agriculture bill to the transportation committee, we'll probably take that bill and on our own volition send it up to agriculture. So there is some flexibility, but the Speaker does it in the House.
Just for information of those that are sitting here, there are some brochures up there that have a listing of all the standing committees in the General Assembly.
Yes. First, I'd like to make an observation that if you didn't have the Dillon rule, you wouldn't have so much legislation. So that might solve some of your problems. But on the other hand, is there any realistic way to set the times for the subcommittee and the committee meetings so that you could fit them all in the time of day, but yet not have any of them start before 8 or 9, something like that, something realistic so that people from the other parts of the state can get to Richmond? You know, as you pointed out, it's a little bit hard to get people up at 4 a.m. to be able to get down to Richmond for a 7 a.m. meeting, and it's even further if you're coming from, you know, further west. Can they fit them in? Has anybody ever tried to reset the times?
Well, I'll speak for the Senate, and we don't have any subcommittees or committees that regularly meet at 7 or 7:30 in the morning. And most of ours don't start meeting until 9 a.m. We occasionally have a couple of committees that, given the number of bills they have, will start out at the beginning of the session meeting at 9, and they'll move it up to 8:30 or 8 o'clock type of thing. And ours subcommittees, all the subcommittees I'm on and virtually all the subcommittees I've dealt with in the Senate do have a scheduled time in which they meet. That being said, you know, one of the advantages we have in the Senate over the House is that our rules allow proxy voting, which the House doesn't have. And given that we have only 40 members of the Senate, and most committees have 15 people, you know, it's not infrequent that you have a lot of people who have conflicting meetings, particularly when we're handling in the Senate, we're handling all the bills that came over from the House, but we have to go to the House committees and subcommittees to present our own bills. And having proxy voting does make a big difference in the Senate. It makes it a lot easier to manage things than the way the House operates there.
This has turned out to be a general assembly.
Yeah, we better
It's based here.
Ask these guys something. I will tell you, the members of the House don't like getting up at 6. Well, actually, I get up. That doesn't make any difference what time I get up. You don't see the 6 a.m., and I have committee meetings at 6 a.m., to be very candid about it. But you don't see that till late in the session. And you see it late in the session because you're either going to have a 6 a.m. hearing or the bill is dead. Take your choice. So it's not an attempt to keep people away. It's just there's so much volume of work to be done. And as the session goes on, the sessions on the floor get longer. They start at noon, right on the minute. And you got to cram these bills in before and after. We have rules that when a subcommittee cannot meet at the same time another subcommittee is meeting at. We have a heck of a time when you get down to the last week or so of trying to figure out how you're going to hear a bill. And some bills do not get heard. But at least in my case, we're not trying to keep y'all away. We're just trying to give the bill a fair hearing.
Mr. Waxman, I'm going to ask you a question. As you teach government, do you teach your students how to find some of this information on the websites, contact their legislators and such?
Excuse me, that's a great question, and it sort of goes to some of the listening to the interchange that I'm hearing Mr. Russ and Mr. Barker talk about. Yes, absolutely, but truthfully, many times they teach me because they're that much more tech savvy and things like that. One of the things that I urge my students to do, and one of the goals that is set out as a government teacher, is to get citizens involved. Civic education is one of the core principles of the Fairfax County Public Education, of a social studies education, as an American government class. So I absolutely do urge them to do all the things we were talking about. Sometimes it's as direct as here's the assignment, this is how you do it. Sometimes it's if you really care about this issue, these are the steps to do. And again, it is amazing how savvy they are in terms of accessing information. Very, very rarely do I get kids tell me they can't find what we're talking about. I'd like to actually just sort of twist this discussion a little bit, shift it a little bit, and ask Senator Barker and Delegate Russ, along these lines of sort of civic engagement, civic involvement, teaching 17 and 18-year-olds what it means to be American citizens and take ownership in their society, in their government, in their society. I mean, with all due respect, as I say this, but this is the kind of question I would get in a classroom setting, and something that I'm sort of left to try to explain to students is, each of you has made a presentation about the rules of the House, the rules of the Senate, and some of the demands on your time and things like that. And again, as somebody who leads a busy life, watched elected officials lead very busy lives, something I would never want to touch. You look at 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, and they look at this and say, this makes no sense. This is not how somebody would create it. This is not efficient. This is not good government. I mean, and again, with all due respect, but this is how the kids come. To set up a system that looks like this, why? Fundamentally, aren't you trying to hide something? Aren't you trying to, not have, smart government, smart legislative processes, things like that?
Which one of you is going to jump on?
And
I'll just add that, because I'm going to get asked that question, so I need an answer.
I'm not going to give you an answer, but I'm going to go back to what Amy said. We are a citizen legislature, and thank goodness for that. I actually think that's a lot better than the Congress. Look what goes on over there. They're over there full time. I think we need to do things. I opposed the limitation of the 15 bills when it first came out. I spoke against it. I thought it was a bad idea. I usually carry a lot of legislation. But after going through this year, I'm gonna support it. I'm gonna continue to support
What
it
is the
because
limitation?
15 bills in the House.
Per person.
Per person,
per
I'm
delegate,
sorry.
per delegate.
Per delegate, 15 bills.
Oh.
You can see
Some,
why.
some have proposed in the past 40 bills.
Yeah.
Okay.
I carried 33 a year ago. So I think that's a good idea. What it made me do is pick and choose what I thought were the better bills for better government, better whatever I was trying to accomplish. But the system, until we can limit the bills some more, which there are pros and cons to that, unless you go to a longer session, a full-time session, it's going to work this way. And I do not support a full-time legislature. I wouldn't be there if it was a full-time legislature, to be very frank about it.
Do you support having the same 60-day legislature both years?
Well, back when Mr. Moncure was there, he helped me on this, Tom. Not too long ago, 25 years ago, they only met every other year.
Oh, my goodness.
Right? And then they said, well, we better meet every year. And it was 30 days.
Constitution 71, make sure.
Okay, 19.
But there was a big reason, if I may interject,
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have telecommunications, and we didn't have healthcare records, and I mean, think about how complicated society and business and commerce has become. So it was you could get away with that 25 years ago, and you just can't now.
I'll just tell you, and then I'm gonna sit down. When we had the extended sessions in 04 and 07, those of us who have real jobs and work, it ruined the year for us. It ruined the year, and guys are dropping out. Guys, and I use that non-gender. Guys are dropping out of the General Assembly because it is taking so much time. We make $17,640 a year. That's what we're paid. You cannot survive and try to run a business or work and do that. And if it gets much longer, more and more people, in my opinion, will not be. So you're going to end up with people who are independently wealthy, retired, or that's a real job.
In terms of efficiency, if you want efficiency, we should do away with the House of Delegates. So we can make that proposal, that efficiency is what you want. However, I think there is an advantage, as much as it was very painful to be on this one particular day this year when I had 10 bills that passed the Senate that all got killed in the House in one day. But I think there's advantage to having a bicameral legislature. You get things that you don't get caught on one side, somebody on the other side will pick up on different issues. You're much less likely to have legislation that doesn't make any sense to go through. And I think there are advantages. So I think we do have an advantage over Nebraska, which is the one state that has a unicameral legislature there. One of the things I think is significant about how you do things is that the public pressure does make a difference. And one of the frustrating things is, as good as the committee process is, we're sort of working out language and cleaning bills up and having them be in good form by the time they get to the full committee, or the committees that get it to the floor of the House or the Senate. One of the frustrating things is when you have legislation that could get majority votes in both places, but it gets blocked from coming to the floor. And one of the things that makes a difference there is when public pressure is applied. And I think we saw some of that in terms of the change in the House this year with the recording of the subcommittee votes and the opening up of the televising of the floor sessions, those types of things.
This leads me to another question. Lobbyists. You say public pressure, but there is not very good transparency of who lobbyists are working for and what bills they're supporting. Any comments on that?
I don't actually think that's right. I think there is transparency. They're required to register and to say who their clients are, and that's also, and I don't.
But not the legislation they're working on, not the
Well,
particular.
the general topics they do.
Sure.
Right.
Well, this is where the fourth estate is valuable, and so let's hope that as all these newspapers start closing across the country, that doesn't happen here, because we know who the lobbyists are, and we write about.
Speak a little bit about the news media, where it's going.
Well, I mean, we're in difficult times. We're in the middle of a perfect storm right now. We were already struggling to retain readership of our print edition, which is where we make our money, because of the advent of the internet and multiple sources of information, blogs, and all that stuff. When the economy tanked and our advertising revenue went through the floor. So we're sort of getting socked on all sides right now. And two major national newspapers have folded in the last month. Yesterday was the last day of publication, Seattle Post and Telegram, which was a tremendous newspaper. And, you know, the Boston Globe is in jeopardy, the Miami Herald is in jeopardy right now. Tribune companies is in jeopardy. And there's a newspaper in Virginia owned by Tribune, the Daily Press, which is a newspaper I used to work for. It's really scary because we, you know, I'm in this profession to help provide information, to contribute to the conversation by being in Richmond. I don't do that now, but I used to, and writing about who the special interests are and what they're lobbying.
But you do that for Fairfax, so it counts.
Yeah, it's a little different. Fairfax is closer to the people. Local government is closer to the residents. But I just want to make one point about those special interests, and the point that you made about the messiness or the badness of the process. And, I don't mean to sound like a Pollyanna, but I actually think that is good government. And I think that's the message to the students, and I know that you know that. But, I mean, it was this ugly at the Constitutional Convention.
And they voted to
3 days after James Madison's birthday, I think it's important to say. I mean, it's
and they voted to keep everything quiet at the
Right.
Constitutional Convention for exactly these reasons. I totally agree.
And it's also built into the whole structure of our nation's government that special interests will be the players. And that's not intrinsically a bad thing. I mean, it can be, but...
Can I just respond?
Yeah, please. You know about this.
Well, I absolutely do, and I am a firm believer in good government. And I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't if I didn't believe in the process and all these kind of things. But I do take it, you know, and it gets harder and harder as the years go on when students look at what goes on, whether it's in Richmond or Washington or other legislative bodies around the country, or they look at the executive branch, president, governor, mayor, whomever, and there's this this aura of secrecy. There's this aura of privileged information. There's this aura of gamesmanship that gets played. Just very interestingly, and this week and next week at Oakton, and this is something we're very proud of, and one of, you know, we get a lot of favorable publicity from other, you know, throughout the Fairfax system. We have a 2-week legislative simulation where we simulate the House of Representatives, or as a legislative body, so that just this morning and and tomorrow morning, my students are meeting. You know, they all write pieces of legislation, 2 pieces of legislation. They all sit in committees. They elect their own leadership. They sit in committees. There's going to be a rules committee that's going to meet after school on Friday. That'll probably go to about 5:30, 6 o'clock. Creating the union calendar for next week, and then we're going to meet as a full house to debate these bills. What happens, and again, this is the real frustration these kids feel, the real sort of anxiety, and just anger when they watch their friends cut deals behind their back in front of them. That's democracy. But then there's also real frustration when the time runs out. Again, very real. I mean, again, and this is what I tell them.
That's a good cue. We're about to run out of time.
Why can't we do it better? You know, kind of thing.
The lady
Oh,
behind you,
yes,
and then you.
I just have a question about, as more and more government documents are on the internet, who's in charge of making sure social security numbers and private information is protected of individuals?
Well, I'm going to be very quick. The General Assembly has spent probably the last 2 or 3 years on that issue. It's a very complex issue. The bottom line is that we have taken that off from almost all documents. I and Joe May were sued by a lady who thinks she got very upset with us because we were recapturing Social Security numbers, and the suit didn't go anywhere, thank goodness. But she does not not old Joe and I and Higher Steve, we're on the science and technology committee for all this. But there's been a real conscious effort to get all that stuff out of the public records. It has not occurred yet.
I advocate for low-income families, homeless, and in reference to your comment about 15 bills, what suggestions do you have for us? Because I understand when Vince Callahan talked to our conference this fall, he said there's 1,200 full-time paid lobbyists up there. And I know when we went to see legislators this summer, there were like hordes of lobbyists coming out of the offices, and we have no chance. I mean, we could identify these as very high-powered lobbyists who obviously were getting the 15 bills, and we weren't. So, you know, I just really have a problem with your limiting bills in terms of,
Just a comment on what you say. I almost think, and these gentlemen might disagree with me, but I almost think that the issue with the power of lobbyists or special interests is not so much a function of the calendar or the process. I think it's a function of the way that their districts are drawn.
Districts are drawn?
Yeah.
Are you talking about redistricting?
Yes.
Oh my goodness!
Oh my goodness!
This is the lead
And redistricting was one of our focuses this year, and we, you know, we understand that that's part of it.
I think that the way that the districts have entrenched the partisan divide by creating these fortresses for incumbents.
Safe seats.
Not all incumbents.
So say, the two of us are not the two you're talking about.
We're not. No, we know that.
Neither of us.
But I think they would not dispute the fact that the majority of the House and the Senate are not in play in part because of the way that those districts are drawn. And I think that my connection to this issue is that it creates a disconnect between the elected official and his or her constituency. So that the special interest advocacy groups can fill that gap.
We just need a break, or do you need, what is the deal?
Just a minute, the swap takes about 3.
3 minutes, but we can keep going?
Oh, okay. Anyway, do any of the students have any questions?
Yeah.
You guys are here.
I have one off the
Yes.
last, talking about
Stand up. Old people can't hear.
talking about redistricting. At Model General Assembly in a couple weeks, I'm actually presenting a bill, along with my friend here, on why we should redistrict without the party lines. So, what would be a strong argument in any of you guys' opinion to get that to pass?
You need to talk to that lady over
This
there.
lady right here.
Let them answer.
The league has done a lot of research on it, and we've written papers on it, so.
Delegate Russ? This is not a transparent system right now.
In the time I've been there, there has not been a redistricting bill that's even gotten any of the committees or floor that I'm on. So I'm going to be very technical guy and study it. But I will tell you one thing. Everybody thinks redistricting will get all of the politics out of the drawing of these lines. Every single bill, and I actually, because I thought y'all were going to ask me that, I looked up every bill that was introduced this year. Guess at the end of the day who had the final authority on where the district lines were drawn? The General Assembly. The General Assembly, and that's where it should rest, in my opinion. But you know, I think progress is being made, and I hope you get it through because I need a whole lot better district.
See?
Senator Barker, your opinion on the redistricting issue?
Well, there's certainly strong arguments. And actually, 2 years ago, before I got elected, the Senate did pass a constitutional amendment that would have done redistricting on a nonpartisan basis, so that would have taken it out of the hands of the General Assembly. Part of the reason that the bills that were passed this year, and we did pass a bill unanimously in the Senate to have a nonpartisan commission to propose districts, with the General Assembly having the final authority, was that was the only way legally it could be done under the Constitution. But we can't get a constitutional amendment. We couldn't pass a constitutional amendment this year or next year to change it anyway, because it'd have to go through a 3-year process. to get that done. So as a result, that's why the bills that were submitted this year did what they proposed, what they did. The bills, I mean, over the last several years, bills have built more support in the Senate, and this year was the first time it passed 39. I think it was 39-0. Somebody wasn't there that day. So it did pass unanimously in the Senate. And what that bill proposed was there be a nonpartisan commission that would recommend the district levels. The General Assembly would then react. There would be an opportunity for further comment from the commission, and then we would pass final legislation.
We need to take a stop. So we can break pace. Switch pace.
There's water up here, y'all need to.
Up front, but I mean, I would look, in terms of your research, and I plead guilty to not knowing the league's position and the research they've done, but I mean, I would look to the state of California. Governor Schwarzenegger has proposed several proposals, taking it out of the hands of the General Assembly, taking it out of the hands of the state Senate, and giving it and making it a nonpartisan kind of thing. California has the benefit of a initiative referendum process that is very active and very robust. But one of Governor Schwarzenegger's proposals is give it to a series of retired judges and let them, in theory, make a nonpartisan look, and then let the citizens have a way to react.
Judges are so nonpartisan.
No, again,
That's a whole other subject.
I would also add to the sort of counterweight to this notion that the districts, and in general, I agree with what Amy's saying, that it's gotten, that this is what has. It's gotten much more polarized than it used to be. But what I would also look to, both in Virginia and at the national level and in states around the country, there have been changes in legislatures, the control of the legislature based on issues, based on citizens getting frustrated, things like that, to the point where that it's not as bad as people are making out of it. So.
Mr. Montour, were you were involved in the legislature as part of a redistricting committee. Give us your sense of, has it changed? Has it not changed?
Well, let me deal with realpolitik. The idea that a legislature is going to make the most political decision they will make without politics is extreme reality. Where this has gotten so insidious, though, this problem, and having watched one of these, it really was the year 2000. You saw it not only in Virginia but throughout the nation. Was the intersection of computer technology and redistricting. And I'm sitting here watching the 2000 redistricting, where you're literally able to take a block and move it in one county and have the entire map work out numbers-wise throughout Virginia. And I really don't know that anybody's gotten a handle on how to usurp that computer technology to a point where you can approach it a little more rationally. But with all the best intentions that I know folks have on that, if you're going to think politics is not going to play at the end of the day, I'd like to suggest that there's another reality.
It seems to me too that the likelihood of a nonpartisan commission getting set up is slim. I mean, the Democrats are asking for it now, but if they take over the House, they're not going to be asking for it.
Yeah, this is a bipartisan situation.
Well, and the party out of power is the one that wants
right.
to be nonpartisan.
Right.
So it seems to me that legal avenues are one of the options for the public, because there are constitutional issues about the way that these districts are drawn, and the principles that are supposed to be in place when you draw districts are flagrantly ignored.
Do we think there's a public,
there's this group called the League of Women Voters. I also wanted to make the point to the student who's working on this that it's not only about party, it's also about incumbency. And so, and that's important because that also gets at how the whole system works when you have incumbency protection and the longest serving folks are unmovable, that has the potential to distance them from their constituents. and their constituency needs.
Senator Burke.
We're just a little,
Wait in.
yeah, a little counterpoint on the partisanship, because I mean, the bill in the Senate this year passed.
I was just
was
gonna say
unanimous.
that.
We have
That's
21
it.
Democrats, we have 19 Republicans, we have a Republican who's lieutenant governor and the tiebreaker, so all that's gotta happen is for me to get hit on the way home and suddenly we have a Republican Senate. And yet, you know, we had that passed. Also, I would say that in 2007, when the Senate did pass a constitutional amendment that actually would have taken the power away, that was when the Republicans controlled the Senate and the House both. So, you know, it was not a situation, and we have had both the governor, who's a Democrat, and the lieutenant governor, who's a Republican, sign on to redistricting. So it's not completely partisan, and it's not completely just who's in power, who's out of power.
Yes, I would like to ask you something about FOIA, because a lot of times during, Sunshine Week, the whole emphasis is on, FOIA. But here today, we've been talking about the rules of the Senate, the rules of the House, and how Fairfax County is open, et cetera. So we really haven't had any discussions of the role of FOIA in either influencing this one way or the other. Is the fact that there is a Freedom of Information Act that lends support to open in government, or is it somewhat irrelevant at this point? What is the exact role and the importance of FOIA in ensuring the open government, both at the county level and at the state level? I know when I was a federal employee, getting a FOIA request was, yeah. I thought these people, they're asking me to spend 100 hours and, $1,000 of paper to do something. But what is the role of FOIA?
You want to answer that, because I think you're probably closer to.
Well,
Yeah.
let me give you all a real example. Lee Albright. Has anybody heard of that name? Lee Albright. One of my fellow board members on VCOM, who several years ago, probably not, they'll lose track of decades after a while, noticed that I think it was a fisheries operation, game commission had of Nelson County, got closed. And his question was, this is a great operation, very valuable, stocking fish, sportsmen, fisher, and was just curious why. And started filing FOIA requests and wasn't getting forthcoming answers. Ultimately ended up suing the agency. You all may remember this because it resulted in the exposure of a number of expenditures by the former director of the Game Commission, who apparently was buying a lot of equipment to go on a informational tour to Africa.
It's more like Africa, right?
Right, and I had buy a lot of equipment to go on this junket, and one of his board members was, and it resulted in his indictment. He was convicted, but board members resigned. There was complete cleaning of the House and Game Commission. Probably needed, but what I'm saying, this is one citizen who saw something wrong and said, I'm going to find out what's going on, and the more he got, so what I'm saying, there is that possibility where a person using FOIA can make a difference.
Can I follow up about the press, because I wanted to connect those two things. A concern of mine is the fact that the newspapers are going into down, and yet they have been one of the greatest assets, I think, in uncovering things by the use, lately, since '74, I guess, the use of FOIA
I
to
use
get at
FOIA
things.
all the time,
Right.
and I'm not an investigative reporter. I mean, I do some digging here and there, but I'm a beat reporter, and I mean, we have lawyers, and the Washington Post is very fortunate because we're a financially strong institution, and we carry weight. I mean, I'm very, very lucky that I work for the Washington Post because our brand matters in Virginia and in Washington. So, in fact, when I file a FOIA letter, I'm luckier than when Citizen Jane files a FOIA letter, because it's the Post, oh my God, if we don't do this, their lawyers are gonna, and we follow up because we've got the pockets to do so. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Well, there's two that I think are interesting. One is Virginia Tech tragedy, and
Thank you.
and you may be able to add a lot more insight onto this than I can. article. Well, Virginia Tech was not forthcoming, and they were in crisis, and there's lots of complicated stuff to talk about regarding what was happening on that campus without pointing fingers. But you know, the management of the aftermath was subpar. I'll agree, on campus, and if we didn't have FOIA, we would not have got all of those emails that went back and forth between teacher and student leading up to the shooting, which told the story that I think is the central theme of that story, that this young man was deeply troubled and fell through the cracks. And we got those documents because Virginia is an open state and because the administration, McCain administration, kind of stepped in and took over management of that crisis. And I really don't mean to point fingers at the academic institution. That was not necessarily their top priority at that moment. And they were literally in tremendous crisis for many months after that. And so it was a difficult situation. But if we didn't have that law, we would have been out of luck. And the public would not have gotten the answers that it was demanding. And that was such a huge story for the Washington Post because so many of the victims and their families are subscribers. And I mean, I think everyone here knows somebody who was touched by that. And they wanted to know what went on. Right. And I got kids who are probably going to go to Virginia public schools, and I want to know what went on.
Well, did FERPA get involved, though, in keeping his records, the killer's records, medical records? I mean, I wanted it, that was going to be my other question. I'm sorry to monopolize, but I am curious. How did FERPA interact with the suppression of allowing the teachers to bring it forth or whatever?
One of the issues that we grapple with regularly is the interplay between FERPA and HIPAA.
That's right.
Okay, so if you want to know why universities need lawyers, let me give you 2 reasons why. It's been interesting since the Tech murders that there has been some looking at FERPA and particularly the Department of Education from a regulatory point of view, making that information a little more accessible. There's been a great deal of attention, particularly with the psychological area, to be able to share this information. So the good news out of the Tech murders is that in an area that really hadn't attracted much attention in terms of both addressing and focus has gotten attention.
And for those who don't know, one of the issues there was that this young man had an IEP at Westfield High School, and Tech didn't know anything about it. And the folks at
Stand up and tell me again, because I'm not here and I'm myself, and I'm right here.
Cho went to Westfield, and is that your district? And he had an individual education program, which means that he was getting special services for a variety of things, but one was emotional issues. And that file did not go to Blacksburg when he matriculated to Tech because of privacy laws.
Okay, correct. That's it.
Thank you.
So they couldn't serve him because they didn't know.
One of the things we've done internally in Tech and as a result of this is set up mechanisms where and again, it depends how the information comes in, but we've made attempts to make sure that information that may be something we want to share comes in a manner that it can be shared. So part of it has been also the dynamics within the university.
I think one of the major tensions is the conflict between wanting to be open but wanting to protect certain elements of privacy there. One of the things I would say is that one of the significant advantages of FOIA is I think it has substantially affected the thought process that goes on in most government agencies. And by and large, if government operates properly, nobody has to file FOIA because there's access to information. And what you find is where there are attempts to sort of shield some of that, that's when you start getting all the FOIA requests. And I'll give you just good examples right close to hand. By and large, in state government, there aren't a whole lot of FOIA requests that come in. They're a modest number, but not an excessive number, because I think by and large we have a fairly open process. The case you talked about was one of those where it probed something that didn't appear to be right, and sure enough, it found something. In Fairfax County, there are not a whole lot of FOIA requests filed. However, all you got to do is follow Sherry home to Prince William County, and in Prince William County, there are dozens of FOIA requests for the school system and the county government all the time because there's been evidence and a clear perception that information is not being handled and shared properly. And so the public gets a mindset, the public gets in its mindset that they're trying to cover up something, and so therefore they want to pursue things. If you're open up front, you don't have to worry about it. You're not going to get many of those FOIA requests that are going to drive you crazy because then you have to do everything.
Well, the league has
We're
the same
gonna,
effect.
we're gonna need to wrap up. This has been very interesting, and hopefully some of our students got some information that they didn't know. Again, I want to thank the university for hosting us. I want to thank our panelists for giving us some wide range of information. I think it's incumbent on the league to continue this effort of Sunshine Week. We invite you to join us. There's information about the league, about how to join the league. And more information regarding Open Sunshine. They have a wonderful website that has all kinds of information of how you can have your government approach. I have one more plug though. This is a election year for the governor's race. And if you have issues such as redistricting or any other issue, all the House of Delegates will be on the ballot. You need to be at forums like this and ask them the questions that you want answered. That's how you get involved in government, and that's how things change. That's right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We should have this, with a little bit of luck, we should have this up within a week on the web. And you'll have it on your website.
Fantastic. We will have
Open
this on
and
the web.
transparent, right?
Yep.
And thank you very much for coming.